The halo of the Grand Minister did not shatter like glass, it unspooled like thread. For eons, that halo had been the absolute horizon of power in the multiverse, a ring of divine authority that separated the created from the creators. Now, it lay dissolving on the floor of the void, turning into meaningless particles of light. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and terrifyingly absolute. It was the silence of a machine that had suddenly stopped humming. Angel Goku, his silver hair dimmed by exhaustion, floated amidst the debris, his breathing ragged. Beside him, Demon Vegeta, surrounded by the dark, crackling aura of destruction energy, clutched his side, his eyes wide with a horror a Saiyan rarely admits. They had won the battle, or so they thought. The Grand Priest was gone. The hierarchy of angels was broken. But the victory felt hollow. The fabric of the world of void did not relax. It tightened. The sky above them, usually a swirling kaleidoscope of infinity, suddenly went flat. It turned a stark, blinding white. No stars, no nebulae, no darkness. Just an endless, sterile sheet of paper waiting to be crumpled. A sound began to hum, not a roar of ki, but a digital screech, a frequency that vibrated in the teeth and marrow of the two Saiyans. It was the sound of a hard drive spinning up to overwrite a file. From that blinding whiteness, he descended. He did not fly, he simply adjusted his coordinates. He was not a dragon of golden scales, nor a beast of rage. He appeared as a silhouette of pure geometry, a humanoid figure comprised of shifting fractals and golden data streams. This was Zalama. Not the wish-granting myth, but the architect, the system administrator. He looked down at the corpse of the Grand Priest, then at Goku and Vegeta. He did not speak with a mouth, yet his voice overrode their thoughts. Cold and devoid of malice. Administrator deceased. Stability compromised. Initiating formatting protocol. Deletion of corrupted variables. Goku. Vegeta. Execute. Before the archives are wiped clean and the memory of this battle dissolves into the void, anchor yourself here. Subscribe, and bear witness to the rebellion against the architect so this timeline does not fade into silence. The silence that descended upon the world of void was not the quiet of a library, nor the stillness of a grave. It was the terrifying, absolute silence of a stopped heart. The Grand Priest, the entity whose mere whisper commanded the deference of the multiverse's most destructive gods, was gone. His eradication should have felt like a liberation, a sudden intake of breath for a cosmos held too long under the heel of absolute order. But as Angel Goku and Demon Vegeta stood amidst the dissolving particles of their fallen foe, they felt no relief. They felt the air turn thin. They felt the fundamental constants of reality, gravity, time, entropy begin to shiver. Goku was the first to sense the shift. His silver eyes, usually sharp with the hyper-awareness of Ultra Instinct, widened in a way that had nothing to do with combat. He didn't sense ki. He didn't sense malice. He sensed a sudden, terrifying absence of possibility. It was as if the future itself had been cropped from the timeline. Vegeta, Goku whispered, his voice cracking, the angelic halo above his head flickering like a dying bulb. Don't move. But the warning came too late for the Prince of Saiyans. Demon Vegeta, intoxicated by the surge of destruction energy that coursed through his veins, a power dark enough to bruise the sky, snarled at the encroaching whiteness. He had killed the apex of the hierarchy. He would not bow to the janitor. With a roar that shook the remaining debris of the arena, Vegeta lunged at the geometric silhouette of Zalama. He gathered the entirety of his Hakai, compressing the power of 1,000 dying suns into his right fist, a blow meant to erase the very concept of this new intruder. You are just another obstacle. Vegeta screamed, driving his fist into the golden fractals of Zalama's chest. There was no impact. There was no explosion. There was no shockwave. Vegeta's fist simply stopped. It didn't hit a barrier. It entered a zone where kinetic energy was no longer a valid variable. The purple flames of destruction energy didn't burn. They turned gray, then white, then vanished into streams of binary code. Zalama did not flinch. The golden data that comprised his form shifted slightly, like sand rearranging itself in the wind. He looked down at the Saiyan prince not with contempt, but with the hollow indifference of an ocean regarding a drowning man. Variable Hakai unrecognized in system root. Zalama's voice resonated, bypassing their ears and vibrating directly against their skulls. Subject: Vegeta. Status: corrupted. Solution: purge. Zalama raised a single hand. He didn't fire a blast. He merely closed his fingers. Instantly, the reality around Vegeta collapsed. It wasn't an attack, it was an edit. The space occupied by Vegeta's right arm, the arm that had just thrown the punch, suddenly pixelated. There was no blood, no pain, just a sudden, horrifying, lack of existence. Vegeta stared, his mind failing to comprehend the visual data. His gauntlet, his skin, his muscle, his bone, they unspooled into golden numbers and floated away into the white void. The prince stumbled back, clutching the empty space where his limb used to be. The pain didn't hit him until seconds later, a cold, phantom burning, the sensation of his soul being torn at the seams. What is this magic? He gasped, his knees buckling. It isn't magic, Vegeta, Goku shouted, forcing himself between his rival and the entity. The angel wings protruding from Goku's back flared, trying to generate a shield of divine light, but the light was dimming, suffocating under the weight of the atmosphere. Hez, not fighting us. Hez deleting us. Goku instinctively shifted into the defensive stance of the angels, a technique designed to fluidly move through any attack, to exist in the spaces between strikes. He tried to perceive Zalama's next move, to let his body react on its own, but Ultra Instinct required a flow of information, an intent to read. Zalama had no intent. He had no spirit. He was a function. How do you dodge a law of physics? How do you sidestep a command that says you are no longer here? Zalama turned his faceless gaze toward Goku. The golden fractals swirled faster. Subject: Son Goku. Anomaly detected. Divine technique unauthorized for mortal biology. Causality error. Initiating system correction. The ground beneath Goku, a slab of super-dense kachin, didn't crack or melt. It simply ceased to be. Goku fell, catching himself on his wings, but as he ascended, he felt a heaviness drag him down. He looked over his shoulder in horror. The feathers of his angelic wings were turning into gray dust, dissolving into the static air. The divinity he had cultivated, the power he had stolen from the realm of the gods to defeat the Grand Priest, was being stripped away like paint from a wall. My power. Goku choked out, feeling the silver glow of his hair fade, the strands turning back to a dull, mortal black. Hez, turning it off. Hez turning us off. Zalama began to walk forward. With every step, the white void expanded, swallowing the debris, the color, and the sound. The universe was being sanitized. The formatting had begun, and there was no corner of creation left to hide in. I said purge. Zalama intoned, his voice devoid of impatience, merely repeating a command that had failed to execute instantaneously. Vegeta, clutching the sparking void where his arm once was, forced himself to his feet. His pride was a stubborn engine. It ran even when the fuel was gone. He looked at the truncated limb. The edge was perfectly smooth, pixelating into golden squares that drifted upward like embers from a dying fire. There was no blood, only a frightening, clean emptiness. You think? Vegeta panted, his voice ragged. You think a missing limb is enough to stop me? I have broken my limits 1,000 times. He raised his remaining left hand, fingers curled into a claw. He didn't try to summon the God Key or the destruction energy that had just failed him. He dug deeper, into the raw, primal, Saiyan rage that had fueled him since his youth. A sphere of chaotic, purple-black energy formed in his palm, a gamma-burst flash, distilled into a singularity of pure desperation. Erase this, Vegeta screamed, hurling the blast. The sphere tore through the white void, screaming as it went. It was a beautiful, catastrophic attack. Enough to shatter a galaxy. But 3 feet away from Zalama, the attack didn't detonate. It unraveled. It was horrifying to watch. The sphere didn't explode. It dismantled. The purple energy turned into wireframes, then into geometry, then into silence. It was like watching a master painter suddenly decide to erase his canvas with a rag. The attack simply ceased to exist, and the momentum nearly threw Vegeta off balance. Energy signature analyzed. Zalama droned, continuing his slow, terrifying walk. Inefficient, chaotic, deleting source? Zalama pointed a finger, not at Vegeta, but at the space around Vegeta. Suddenly, the white floor beneath the Saiyan prince began to glow. A cage of golden light beams erupted from the ground, boxing Vegeta in. He tried to fly upward, but the ceiling of the cage slammed down, crushing him toward the floor. It wasn't just a physical barrier, it was a containment file. Vegeta roared, pushing against the golden bars, but where his skin touched the light, it began to crackle and fade into data. Vegeta, Goku cried out. He tried to shunken Ito, instant transmission, to his rival's side, to pull him out of the trap. He placed 2 fingers to his forehead to lock onto Vegeta's fading ki. Nothing happened. Goku stood frozen, fingers against his brow. The familiar sensation of slipping through space was gone. The dimension of instant transmission, the pocket of reality he used to travel, had been patched out. He was grounded, movement restricted, Zalama stated, shifting his gaze to Goku, isolating variables to prevent cross-contamination. Goku felt a cold sweat break out on his back. He had faced Frieza on a dying planet. He had faced Cell's self-destruction. He had faced Jiren's overwhelming strength, but in all those battles, there was a path to victory, a higher power level, a better strategy, a deeper well of emotion. This was different. This was fighting the paper you were drawn on. Goku looked down at his hands. The angelic aura was completely gone now. Even his Super Saiyan transformations felt distant, locked behind a heavy door he couldn't open. He was reverting. He wasn't Angel Goku anymore. He wasn't even Super Saiyan Goku. He was just a Saiyan, just a man. We can't win, Goku whispered, the realization hitting him with the force of a planet. Vegeta. We can't beat him. Has not a fighter. Has the rules. The golden cage around Vegeta began to shrink. The prince fell to his knees, his armor disintegrating, his breathing turning into panicked gasps as the deletion zone pressed against his very skin. Kakarot. Vegeta yelled, the name tearing from his throat. It wasn't a curse this time. It was a plea. Do something! Don't just stand there and watch us get recycled. Goku looked at Vegeta, trapped, broken, fading. Then he looked at Zalama, the cold, golden, inevitable. A memory flashed in Goku's mind, not of training, or of eating, or of fighting, but of a sensation of two souls overlapping, a sensation of a power that didn't just add two numbers together, but multiplied them into infinity, a power that created a completely new being. But they had no Potara earrings. The Kaioshins were gone or unconscious. The fusion dance required perfect symmetry, perfect timing, and crucially, space to perform the steps. They had none of those things. Zalama raised both hands. The white void began to brighten to an unbearable intensity. The format was entering its final stage, formatting in 10, 9, 8. The countdown echoed in their minds like a funeral bell. Goku looked at Vegeta. Vegeta looked back, his eyes wide, the golden light consuming his legs. In that fraction of a second, a silent conversation passed between them, a lifetime of rivalry, hatred, respect, and brotherhood compressed into a single glance. They didn't need the dance. They didn't need the earrings. They needed a miracle. Or perhaps they needed to break the rules one last time. Vegeta! Goku shouted, his voice cutting through the rising hum of the system purge. He didn't run away. He ran toward the deletion cage. The energy! The deletion energy! It's breaking us down into raw data. Vegeta, grimacing as the golden light ate away at his boots, looked up, confusion warring with pain in his eyes. Have you lost your mind, clown? Stay back. No. Goku slammed his hands against the golden barrier of the cage. His palms hissed and smoked, fingers instantly beginning to pixelate. Don't, you see? Hes turning us into the same thing. Hes breaking down our boundaries to erase us. Goku's eyes burned with a desperate, frantic intelligence. If we're just data. If we're just energy, then we don't need the earrings to mix. We don't need the dance to synchronize. Vegeta stared at him, the realization dawning like a horrifying sunrise. The barrier wasn't just a cage, it was a melting pot. Zalama was dissolving their physical forms into pure information to be wiped. But in that brief moment before the wipe, when the body is gone but the consciousness remains, they would be fluid. They would be compatible. You want to fuse. Vegeta gritted his teeth, the pain now searing up his thighs. By letting him kill us, we fuse as we die. Goku roared, pushing harder against the barrier. The golden light began to consume his forearms. It's the only way to cheat the system. We have to become one file before he deletes 2, 5, 4, 3. Zalama's voice was thunder, shaking the very foundation of the void. Vegeta looked at his vanishing body. He looked at Goku, who was voluntarily dissolving his own arms just to reach him. The Prince of Saiyans felt a strange, terrifying calm wash over him. It was madness. It was suicide. It was exactly the kind of gamble a Saiyan would take. Fine, Vegeta snarled, a feral grin twisting his face even as it began to crack into light. If we go to hell, Kakarot, we go as the strongest being in creation. Vegeta lunged forward, not away from the deletion wall, but into it, reaching out with his remaining hand. Goku screamed as he shoved his dissolving torso through the barrier. The pain was beyond physical. It was the sensation of his identity being unraveled. But he didn't stop. 2. Their hands met. Not flesh on flesh, not glove on skin, but light on light. The moment they touched, the format command hit them. The white light swallowed them whole. Their bodies disintegrated instantly, stripped of atoms, stripped of cells. They were reduced to 2 swirling storms of soul data, one bright and burning like a sun, the other dark and dense like a black hole. 1. Zalama closed his fist. Delete. The command executed. The space where Goku and Vegeta stood was wiped clean. The energy spikes flatlined. The chaos vanished. Silence returned to the world of void. Zalama lowered his hands. The golden fractals of his body slowed their rotation. The system scan swept the area. Subject: Goku. Not found. Subject: Vegeta. Not found. The architect stood alone in the pristine, infinite white. The threat was neutralized. The anomaly was corrected. Order had been restored. He turned his back on the empty coordinates, the golden data streams of his cape flowing behind him, and prepared to ascend back to the upper layer of reality, to begin the process of rebuilding the angelic hierarchy. But then, a ripple. It wasn't a sound, it was a shudder in the floor, a tiny, microscopic vibration in the white code. Zalama stopped. He did not turn around immediately. For the first time since his manifestation, the golden fractals of his face paused, processing an input that shouldn't exist. The white floor where the Saiyans had been erased didn't stay white. A small, black crack appeared. Then another. Then another. Like a spiderweb fracturing a mirror. From the center of the cracks, a sound emerged. Low at first, then rising. A deep, resonant thrumming. It sounded like a heartbeat, but it was too heavy, too loud, too complex for a single heart. Thump thump. The cracks widened, bleeding a strange, unseen color, a mixture of silver and violet that hurt the eyes to look at. Thump thump. Zalama turned slowly, his system flashing a warning. Error. Cache corruption. Deleted file restoring. A laugh echoed from the cracks. It wasn't Goku's cheerful chuckle. It wasn't Vegeta's arrogant scoff. It was a dual-tone vibration, two voices layered so perfectly they sounded like a choir of war gods. Sorry to interrupt the reboot, the voice said, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. The white ground exploded. The explosion was not fire. It was a violent corruption of the canvas. Where the pristine white void had been ruptured, a swirling vortex of jagged, multicolored pixels churned like a digital hurricane. Black, silver, and violet data streams whipped around a central point, defying the gravity of the null space. The sound was deafening, a screeching feedback loop of reality, trying to reject something it could not process. Zalama, the architect, stepped back. His golden geometric form flickered, a rare sign of processing instability. Alert. Fatal exception. His voice intoned, losing its smooth divine resonance and taking on a harsh, mechanical edge. Data cluster refusing deletion. Source code rewriting itself. Attempting forced quarantine. He raised a hand, and the white floor attempted to fold over the glitch, to bury it under layers of nothingness. But the floor shattered. The nothingness was infected. The corruption spread, turning the sterile white ground into a dark, crackling landscape of obsidian glass and silver sparks. From the heart of the digital storm, a boot stepped out. It was black, tipped with silver metal. Then came the pants, baggy and white, held up by a sash of deep, bruised violet. Then the torso muscular, defined, glowing with a faint, impossible luminescence. And finally, the vest. It was the traditional Metamoran vest, but it was tattered, the padding torn and smoking, looking less like a uniform and more like a flag that had survived a nuclear war. The figure stopped. He rolled his neck, the sound cracking like a thunderclap in the silence. He lifted a hand to his face, brushing a stray lock of hair away from his eyes. The hair was a wild, gravity-defying mane, black at the roots, spiking upward into a radiant, shifting silver that seemed to breathe. But it was the eyes that froze the architect. The left eye was a piercing, crystalline silver, the hallmark of the angels, cold and serene. The right eye was a deep, ferocious violet, the mark of a destroyer, burning with chaotic intent. Demon god Gogeta had arrived. He did not scream, he did not power up. He simply existed, standing in the middle of the corrupted zone, radiating an aura that felt heavy. It wasn't the weight of gravity, it was the weight of truth. His mere presence was bending the light around him, forcing the world of void to acknowledge him. Zalama stared. Scan complete. Subject identification. Impossible. Genetic data matches subject Goku and subject Vegeta. Energy signature matches angelic law and destruction entropy. These variables cannot coexist. You are a paradox. Gogeta looked down at his own hands, flexing his fingers. He watched the silver and violet energy dance across his skin. Two opposite forces, swirling in perfect, terrifying harmony. A paradox, Gogeta said. His voice was a marvel, the playful, youthful lilt of Goku wrapped in the velvet, regal baritone of Vegeta. It reverberated through the void, not just as sound, but as authority. Is that what you call it when the math doesn't add up? Zalama. Gogeta looked up, locking his heterochromatic gaze onto the golden entity. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lip, arrogant, dangerous, and absolutely calm. "I'd say I'm more of a miraculous exception." Zalama's golden fractals began to spin rapidly. The system could not allow this. The logic of the multiverse was binary. Creator and created, divine and mortal, order and chaos. This being was everything at once. He was a violation of the source code. The system does not tolerate exceptions, Zalama stated, his voice dropping an octave, shaking the void. Reinitiating, formatting protocol, level 10. Absolute erasure. The white void screamed as Zalama drew power from the very walls of the dimension. He didn't just summon energy, he summoned the concept of end. A halo of blinding white command code formed above his head, aiming directly at the fusion. The attack did not travel through space, it simply occurred. Zalama's absolute erasure was not a beam of ki, or a wave of magic. It was a rewrite of history. The white halo above the architect's head pulsed once, and a cylinder of pure negation slammed down onto Gogeta's coordinates. Inside that cylinder, the laws of thermodynamics were suspended. Atoms were told to forget their bonds. Energy was told to forget its frequency. It was a command that had silenced universes before they were even born. The impact was silent, a blinding column of white nothingness that connected the floor to the infinite ceiling. The corrupted data storm that surrounded Gogeta vanished instantly, scrubbed clean. Zalama watched, his golden fractals shimmering with the cold satisfaction of a completed task. Target deleted. System stability restoring to 99%. But the number on his internal interface didn't hold. It flickered. 99%. 80%, 40%. Error. The column of white negation began to bulge. It wasn't fading, it was being pushed from the inside. A hand gloved in black, wreathed in silver flame, punched through the wall of the erasure beam. Then another hand. With a sound like tearing metal, the cylinder of nothingness was ripped open from within. Gogeta stepped out. He was untouched. He hadn't blocked the attack. He hadn't dodged it. He had simply refused to acknowledge it. The delete command had washed over him like water over oil. He dusted off his shoulder, where a few lingering pixels of erasure energy fizzled and died against his aura. "You call that absolute?" Gogeta asked, his voice low, vibrating with a terrifying disappointment. It felt more like a suggestion. Zalama took a step back. For the first time, the golden geometry of his face contorted, mimicking the expression of shock. "Inconceivable. You are data. I am the administrator. I deleted you. Why do you persist?" Gogeta began to walk forward. He didn't rush. He walked with the casual, predatory grace of a panther that knows the jungle belongs to it. With every step, the white floor cracked under his boots, leaking that violet-silver corruption. The very reality of the world of void was bending, warping, to accommodate his density. "You treated us like files," Gogeta said, his eyes narrowing. The violet eye flared, emitting a smoke-like trail of destruction energy, while the silver eye shone with the hard, unyielding light of angelic law. "You thought you could just highlight us and press a button, but you made a mistake, architect." Gogeta stopped 10 paces from the entity. He crossed his arms, the muscles distinct and humming with power. "You stripped away our bodies. You stripped away our limits. You tried to break us down into raw information." Gogeta smirked, a terrifying expression that combined Vegeta's cruelty with Goku's confidence. "But you forgot one thing. Saiyans don't die when they break. We evolve." Zalama raised his hand again, panic beginning to bleed into his movements. He fired a rapid barrage of correction codes, jagged spears of golden light meant to rewrite DNA. Gogeta didn't move. He simply glared. "Kish!" The spears shattered against his gaze. They didn't even touch his skin. The sheer pressure of his spiritual presence crushed the attacks in midair, turning them into harmless sparkles of dust. "You are not the dragon," Gogeta observed, tilting his head. "Shenron, Purunga, even the Super Shenron. They have warmth. They have a soul. Deep down. You are just the machine they run on. I am the system." Zalama roared, his voice losing its robotic calm and becoming a cacophony of outraged noise. "I am the structure of the multiverse. Without me, there is only chaos. You are a glitch. An error that must be patched. An error." Gogeta laughed. The sound was like a shockwave, blowing back the golden cape of the architect. "You look at me and you see something that shouldn't exist. An angel and a destroyer. A mortal and a god. Order and chaos mixed into one vessel." Gogeta uncrossed his arms. He clenched his fists, and the void suddenly darkened. The white infinity was stained by a massive, dual-colored aura that erupted around him, a towering pillar of silver light wrapped in ribbons of violet flame. The pressure was immense. It wasn't just power, it was authority. "I'm not an error, Zalama," Gogeta said, his voice dropping to a whisper that echoed louder than a scream. He vanished. In an instant, faster than time, faster than data, he reappeared directly in front of Zalama, his face inches from the golden mask. "I am the upgrade." Zalama flinched. It was a microscopic movement, a twitch of golden data, that shouldn't have been possible for a being of absolute geometry. But fear is not a biological reaction. It is the recognition of a superior variable. For the first time in the history of the multiverse, the system administrator was afraid of the file it was trying to delete. "Get out of my personal space," Zalama commanded, though the authority in his voice was cracking. He raised a hand, palm glowing with a concentrated sphere of formatting code. A raw, white light meant to overwrite existence at point-blank range. He thrust his palm toward Gogeta's chest. Gogeta didn't blink. He didn't block. He simply exhaled. The breath wasn't air. It was a shockwave of ki so dense it possessed physical mass. The exhalation hit Zalama's hand like a physical wall, deflecting the erasure blast harmlessly to the side, where it carved a hole in the infinite white horizon. Before Zalama could recalibrate, Gogeta moved. It wasn't a punch. It was a grip. Gogeta's hand, wreathed in the violet smoke of destruction, clamped onto Zalama's wrist. Crack. The sound was sickening, like glass breaking underwater. Zalama's arm, composed of divine algorithms and golden light, fractured under the pressure. The invincible geometry of the architect buckled. Damage detected. Zalama shrieked, the golden fractals of his face spinning wildly. "Unauthorized contact! Release! Release!" "You feel that?" Gogeta whispered, leaning in closer, his heterochromatic eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. "That's pain. It's what we feel when you play games with our lives." The corruption from Gogeta's hand began to spread. The violet and silver energy didn't just break Zalama's arm. It infected it. The golden code turned gray, then black, rusting instantly under the touch of the demon god. The perfection of the system was being poisoned by the chaos of mortality. Zalama roared a sound of digital fury and ripped his arm free, stumbling back. He looked at his wrist, watching the corruption spread toward his elbow. With a ruthless, decisive motion, Zalama severed his own arm. The limb fell to the white floor and dissolved into static. "You." Zalama's voice was now a chorus of glitches, low and distorted. He regenerated the arm instantly, but the new limb was paler, less radiant. The fear had taken root. "You are a virus. A sentient, violent virus." Gogeta straightened his vest, the tattered fabric flowing in the non-existent wind. He cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing like cannon fire. "Call me what you want," Gogeta said, shifting his stance. He spread his legs slightly, lowering his center of gravity. His aura exploded outward, no longer a column, but a vast, swirling galaxy of silver and violet that began to consume the white void. The paper of reality was burning away, revealing the dark, starry truth underneath. "But the system is crashing, Zalama," Gogeta declared, a smirk cutting across his face, sharp, wild, and eager. "And I'm the reboot." Zalama stopped retreating. The golden light around him solidified. He realized, finally, that he could not edit this enemy away. He could not command him to vanish. If he wanted to survive, the architect would have to do something he had never deigned to do. He would have to fight. "Very well," Zalama said, his voice stabilizing, turning cold and hard as iron. "If the file cannot be deleted, it must be destroyed manually." Combat mode. Engaged. The white void shattered completely. The conversation ended with the sound of the universe breaking. There was no starter pistol, no signal. There was only the sudden, violent collapse of distance. Gogeta and Zalama vanished from sight simultaneously. To a normal observer, the world of void would have appeared empty for a heartbeat. But, to the cosmos itself, the center of the arena had become a singularity of violence. Boom. They reappeared in the center of the sky, their fists colliding. The impact didn't create a shockwave of wind. It created a shockwave of logic. The force of the blow rewrote the physics of the immediate area. Gravity reversed instantly, debris from the shattered floor fell upward, colors inverted. The sound of the punch arrived 3 seconds before the impact actually happened. Gogeta was laughing. As their fists remained locked, pushing against each other in a contest of raw strength, Gogeta's violet aura flared, eating away at Zalama's golden shield. The fusion was enjoying this. The angelic calmness of Goku allowed him to perceive every micro-movement of Zalama's data, while the demonic ruthlessness of Vegeta drove his body to exploit every opening with brutal efficiency. "Is that all?" Gogeta taunted. Spinning mid-air, and delivering a heel kick that wrapped around Zalama's guard. The kick connected with the architect's neck. Clang. It sounded like a bell tolling the end of an era. Zalama was sent rocketing downward, crashing through layer after layer of the dimensional floor. He didn't just hit the ground. He punched a hole through the fabric of the dimension, tumbling into the raw, unformed chaos beneath the world of void. Gogeta didn't wait. He pointed a finger at the fallen god. Big bang. A sphere of energy formed at his fingertip. But it wasn't blue. It was a terrifying swirling orb of silver light with a core of black destruction. Kamehameha. The beam fired. It didn't travel in a straight line. It spiraled, tearing through space like a drill. It was a void version of the technique, an attack that didn't just burn, but erased the space it traveled through. Down in the darkness of the subdimension, Zalama looked up to see the column of silver death descending upon him. Calculated defense. Mirror dimension. Zalama intoned. He raised both hands, and the space in front of him folded like origami. He created a mirror of reality, intending to reflect the attack back at Gogeta. The beam hit the mirror. For a microsecond, the mirror held. Then, the silver light of the angels inside the beam refused to be reflected. It shattered the mirror. The blast consumed Zalama. An explosion of incomprehensible scale erupted from the pit, rising like a mushroom cloud of golden binary code and silver fire. The shockwave blew Gogeta's hair back, but he stood firm in the air, arms crossed, watching the destruction with critical eyes. Hez not dead, Gogeta muttered, his voice shifting to the deeper, grittier tone of Vegeta. Hez, just changing formats. From the heart of the explosion, a sound began to rise. A digital screeching, like a modem connecting to hell. The golden debris stopped falling. It began to float, to gather, to construct. The smoke cleared. Zalama was gone. In his place stood a construct twice as large, with 4 arms, his body no longer made of fractals, but of solid, hard light armor. He held a sword in each of his 4 hands, swords not made of metal, but of the timeline itself. Each blade shimmered with images of the past, present, and future. Update complete, the 4-armed avatar announced, his voice layered and harmonic. Version 2. You wish to battle concepts? Then let us see if you can parry time. Zalama moved, and history screamed. The 4 arms of the architect didn't swing in unison. They swung in different eras. The first blade, shimmering with the blue light of the past, slashed horizontally. Gogeta leaned back, the tip of the sword missing his throat by a millimeter. But even the miss carried a consequence. As the blade sliced through the empty air where Gogeta's neck had been, the space behind him rippled. Images flickered in the wound of reality. A glimpse of planet Vegeta exploding, a flash of Goku landing on Earth. The sword hadn't just cut the air. It had cut the memory of the location. Dangerous toys. Gogeta murmured, his eyes narrowing as he backflipped away, his movements leaving trails of violet after images. Zalama pressed the advantage. He was a whirlwind of temporal violence. The second sword, burning with the red light of the present, thrust forward. The third and fourth crackling, with the white unknown of the future, chopped downward in a pincer movement. Gogeta twisted in mid-air, a silver drill of motion. He was faster than light, but Zalama wasn't using speed. He was editing the sequence of events. The future blades arrived at Gogeta's position before Zalama had even swung them. SHK Ryip. A tear appeared on Gogeta's shoulder. Blood glowing with a strange, iridescent sheen sprayed into the void. Hit confirmed. Zalama stated, his 4 arms rotating like the gears of a cosmic clock. Your timeline has been severed. That wound will not heal, for in the future I have written, you are already dead. Gogeta landed on a floating chunk of the shattered floor, skidding to a halt. He glanced at his shoulder. The wound wasn't closing. It was festering with white data, trying to overwrite his flesh. The fusion chuckled. It was a low, dry sound that vibrated in his chest. He rolled his shoulder, and the iridescent blood hissed, evaporating into steam. You write the future? Gogeta asked, looking up. The silver in his hair began to shine brighter, blindingly so, while the violet aura around his feet darkened into a heavy, suffocating sludge. That's the problem with you systems. You think everything is a script. Gogeta raised his hand. A small, rainbow-colored sphere appeared in his palm, the Stardust Breaker. But it was different. It wasn't just a sphere of light, it was rotating violently, pulling the debris of the void into its orbit. Let me show you a technique that doesn't read the script, Gogeta whispered. It burns the book. He crushed the sphere in his hand. Crack! The energy didn't fly outward. It infused into Gogeta's body. His skin turned a shade of obsidian gray for a split second before returning to normal. He had internalized the Soul Punisher, turning his entire physical form into a weapon of judgment. Zalama swung all 4 swords at once, an inescapable net of past, present, and future, meant to dice the fusion into history. Gogeta didn't dodge. He stepped into the blades, he caught the past sword with his left hand. He caught the future sword with his right. Zalama's optical sensors widened. Impossible. You cannot touch time. It is intangible. I'm not touching time. Gogeta snarled, his grip tightening. The swords began to vibrate. Cracks appeared on the blades, spiderwebs of light spreading through the captured timelines. I'm touching the lie you call order. Gogeta's violet aura exploded, rushing up his arms and into the swords. Destruction energy, fueled by the limitless Kai of the fusion, didn't just break the weapons, it erased the concepts they held. The images of the past in the left sword screamed and vanished. The white potential of the future and the right sword turned to gray ash. With a roar that shook the foundations of the dimension, Gogeta squeezed. Shatter. The swords of time exploded into millions of harmless seconds, raining down like glitter. Gogeta didn't stop. He used the momentum to spin, delivering a double leg kick to Zalama's chest. The impact was so heavy, it didn't just push Zalama back. It dented his armor, collapsing his chest cavity inward. The architect crashed backward, his remaining 2 swords slipping from his grasp. He tumbled through the void, his system flashing red warnings. Subject exceeds logical parameters. Zalama stuttered, trying to regain his balance. He is deleting my code with brute force. Gogeta floated above, the rainbow dust of the shattered time sword swirling around him like a galaxy. He looked down, his face a mask of cold, divine judgment. You can't calculate me, Zalama, Gogeta said, pointing a finger at the staggering god. Because I'm not a variable. I'm the end of the equation. Zalama looked up, his 4 arms twitching. The realization hit him. The system was failing. The update was insufficient. There was only one option left. The option he had forbidden himself from using, for fear it would break the multiverse itself. You leave me no choice, Zalama said, his voice becoming eerily calm. The 4 arms retracted into his body. The golden armor began to melt, expanding, growing. If the software cannot contain you, then the hardware must crush you. The void began to shake, not vibrate, shake. The walls of infinity began to close in. The expansion was not biological, it was architectural. Zalama did not grow like a Namekian. He unfolded. The golden armor that had clad his humanoid form liquefied, shooting outward in all directions like molten gold violently ejected from a star. The world of void, once an infinite canvas of nothingness, was suddenly enclosed. The liquid gold hardened, forming walls, a ceiling, and a floor that stretched for light years. Gogeta floated in the center of this new golden sphere, looking around. He was no longer in a void, he was inside Zalama. You wish to fight the architect. The voice did not come from a specific direction. It vibrated from the golden walls, from the floor, from the very atoms of the air. Then fight the house I built. The walls began to shift. Massive pistons, the size of planetary systems, emerged from the golden surface. Circuitry glowing with blinding white light etched itself across the horizon. A face formed in the ceiling, a face so colossal that Gogeta was smaller than a single pixel in its eye. This was Zalama's omnipotent true form, the Mainframe. Gogeta hovered in the center, a speck of silver and violet dust against the machinery of a god. He crossed his arms, his cape fluttering in the static discharge of the giant. Compensating for something, Gogeta yelled up at the Skyface. Termination. The Skyface boomed. From the walls, thousands of golden hands emerged. They were not human hands, they were geometric claws, each one large enough to crush a star. They surged toward Gogeta from every angle, up, down, left, right. There was no dodge path. The environment itself was attacking. Gogeta smirked. Finally. A target I can't miss. He moved. To the giant eyes of Zalama, Gogeta was a streak of impossible light. He didn't just fly, he ricocheted. He bounced off the palm of one giant hand, shattered the finger of another, and drilled through the palm of a third. Every impact created a nuclear explosion of data, sending golden shrapnel raining down like meteors. Boom, boom, crack. Gogeta was a bullet in a clockwork mechanism. He severed cables thick as rivers. He smashed logic gates the size of mountains. Pest! Zalama roared. The gravity inside the sphere suddenly increased a billionfold. Gogeta dropped 10 feet before catching himself. The pressure was immense enough to flatten a galaxy into a pancake. His bones creaked. The silver aura around him flickered, heavy. Gogeta grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. Hez using the mass of the entire multiverse to weigh me down. Processing speed. Slowed. Zalama droned. CPU temperature. Rising. Initiating coolant. Flush. Absolute zero. Vents open in the golden walls. A white mist sprayed out liquid helium on a cosmic scale, but colder. It was the temperature of the void between universes, a cold so absolute, it stopped atomic motion instantly. The mist rushed toward the immobilized Gogeta. Gravity and ice. Gogeta's teeth clenched. He could feel his blood slowing down. His aura was freezing into solid crystal shards around him. Creative. But Gogeta closed his eyes. He stopped fighting the gravity. He stopped fighting the cold. He went inward. Inside the fusion, Goku's instinct for survival met Vegeta's refusal to yield. They found a spark. Not of anger, but of freedom. Ka. The chant began. It was a whisper, but it cut through the roaring machinery. M.E. The ice reached him. It encased Gogeta in a diamond-hard tomb of absolute zero. Zalama watched, satisfied. The glitch was frozen. The virus was quarantined. System stabilized. Zalama announced, deleting trash file. A massive crusher, a flat plate of golden metal the size of a continent, descended from the ceiling to pulverize the frozen Saiyan. H.A. Inside the ice, a light began to shine. Not silver, not violet, but a blinding, prismatic white. The white of a blank page. Me. The ice didn't melt. It shattered. Ha. The blast that erupted from Gogeta was not a beam. It was an omnidirectional wave of rejection. It blew the gravity away. It vaporized the absolute zero mist. It caught the descending continent crusher and disintegrated it into dust. Gogeta floated in the center of the explosion. His appearance had changed. The tattered vest was gone, replaced by an upper body covered in shining, runic markings. His hair was no longer silver or black. It was translucent, flowing like water, shifting through every color of the spectrum. He had unlocked the final state. The state that existed outside the system. You call yourself the hardware, Zalama? Gogeta asked, his voice sounding like a choir of angels, screaming in harmony. He raised a single hand, pointing at the colossal face in the sky. Then, I am the power surge. The golden sphere of reality didn't just vibrate, it began to glitch. Zalama, the mainframe of existence, felt a sensation that had been obsolete since the dawn of time, instability. The golden walls of his internal cosmos flickered, momentarily showing the black void behind them, then snapping back. The giant face in the ceiling, the interface of the administrator distorted, its perfect symmetry ruining as pixels of static bled across its eyes. Warning, critical overload. Zalama's voice boomed, but it was skipping. External. External energy source. Incompatible with reality engine. Gogeta shot upward. He was a comet of prismatic light. The translucent hair flowed behind him like liquid glass, refracting colors that had no names. The runic markings on his chest pulsed in sync with the heartbeat of the multiverse. He didn't fly by pushing against the air. He flew by pulling the destination toward him. Firewall. Activate. Zalama roared. The space between Gogeta and the giant face solidified. Layer after layer of hexagonal barriers appeared, crimson, burning, impenetrable fields of absolute rejection. These were the barriers that separated dimensions, the walls that kept the demon realm from spilling into the mortal world. Gogeta didn't slow down. He didn't even make a fist. He flew through them. Shatter, shatter, shatter. The sound was like breaking stained glass. Gogeta's body was vibrating at a frequency so high that the barriers couldn't register his physical presence until he had already passed through them. He left holes in the defense grid that refused to close, the edges burning with that rainbow fire. You built walls to keep people out, Gogeta whispered, his voice carrying clearly over the roar of the crumbling system. But you forgot that Saiyans thrive when they're cornered. He was close now. The colossal face of Zalama loomed before him, filling his entire vision. The eyes of the giant were lakes of golden code, swirling with panic. "Do not approach," Zalama shrieked. "I am the Colonel. If I crash, everything crashes. The universes. The timelines. All of it will be unmade." Gogeta stopped. He hovered right in front of the bridge of the giant's nose. He looked small, insignificant, a speck of dust against a mountain. "No," Gogeta said softly. The prismatic light of his hair settled, glowing with a serene, terrifying calmness. "The universes don't need a jailer, Zalama. They need to breathe." Gogeta raised his right arm. The runic markings on his skin began to detach, floating off his body and swirling around his fist. They spun faster and faster, creating a ring of ancient text, the original source code of life, raw and untamed. "And I'm going to break the lock?" Zalama realized, too late, what Gogeta was doing. He wasn't gathering ki. He wasn't gathering destruction energy. He was gathering the narrative. He was concentrating the sheer, unquantifiable will of every mortal who had ever defied the gods into a single point of impact. Total system purge. Zalama screamed. The giant eyes fired 2 beams of concentrated erasure, the format beam from before, but amplified 1,000 times. The beams struck Gogeta. They washed over him. They engulfed him. The screen went white, but inside the white, a fist moved. Gogeta punched the beam. He didn't deflect it. He punched it upstream. His fist drove through the erasure light, splitting the river of energy in half. He swam up the waterfall of destruction, driving his knuckles closer and closer and closer to the architect's face. This is for the mortals you called errors. Gogeta roared, his voice finally breaking into the raw, dual-layered scream of Goku and Vegeta. The fist connected. The impact did not create a sound. It created a silence that swallowed the history of the multiverse. Gogeta's fist, wrapped in the runic code of the Omni-Breaker, connected with the forehead of the colossal golden face. For a single, stretched nanosecond, nothing happened. The tiny figure of the Saiyan fusion hung suspended against the monumental scale of the architect, a speck of dust punching a god. Then, the hairline fracture appeared. It started at the point of impact, a thin, jagged black line running down the bridge of Zalama's nose. It spread upward, splitting the forehead. It spread outward, cracking the golden cheeks. Sis.tem. Zalama's voice was no longer a boom. It was a dying groan, the pitch sliding downward into a garbled subsonic frequency. The runic energy from Gogeta's fist exploded. It didn't blow outward, it rushed into the crack. The rainbow light flooded the internal circuitry of the giant, burning through the golden veins of the mainframe. Crash. The sound finally caught up, a deafening, horrific sound of shattering glass on a cosmic scale. The giant face of Zalama exploded. Shards of golden armor, the size of continents, peeled away and drifted into the void. Beneath the armor, there was no flesh, no spirit. There was only a blinding white light that was rapidly dimming. The eyes of the architect flickered, once red, then black, then dead. The golden sphere that encompassed them, the hardware of the dimension, began to collapse. The walls dissolved into binary rain. The floor turned to mist. The laws of physics, which Zalama had tightened into a stranglehold, snapped back into place with a violent elasticity. Gogeta floated amidst the falling ruin of the system. He watched as the central core of Zalama, a pulsating geometric heart of gold, cracked down the middle. Administrator. Offline. The voice whispered, fading into the static. The heart shattered into dust. Gogeta lowered his fist. The runic markings on his body faded. The translucent, prismatic hair dimmed, returning to the familiar spike of black and gold, then fading further. The Omni-Breaker state was gone. He was just Gogeta again, tired, his vest torn, his breathing heavy, but standing victorious over the wreckage of absolute order. He looked at the dissolving data that used to be the strongest entity in existence. Update complete, Gogeta whispered. Then, the light left his eyes. The immense fusion energy, having burned through its duration in mere minutes due to the intensity of the battle, reached its limit. Gogeta didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply closed his eyes and let go. A blinding flash of white light engulfed him, softer this time. The silhouette of the ultimate warrior split apart. The paradox resolved itself. The world of void was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the sterile, terrifying silence of a formatting hard drive. It was the natural, messy silence of a battlefield after the war is done. The air was filled with drifting particles of gold, the remains of Zalama glittering like stardust. The oppressive white sky had faded, revealing the deep, infinite black of the true cosmos, dotted with distant, twinkling stars that seemed to shine brighter than before. 2 bodies plummeted through the dark. Goku and Vegeta fell side by side, unconscious. Their clothes were shredded, their bodies covered in bruises that glowed with faint residual energy. They didn't look like gods. They didn't look like demons. They looked like men who had carried the weight of the universe and collapsed under it. They hit the floating remnant of the arena floor with a heavy thud. Minutes passed. The only sound was the cosmic wind howling through the debris. Goku was the first to stir. He groaned, his fingers twitching against the cold stone. He forced one eye open, then the other. Everything hurt. His muscles felt like they had been pulled apart and stitched back together wrong. Vegeta, he rasped, his throat dry. Hey. Vegeta. Beside him, the Prince of Saiyans lay face down. He didn't move. Panic flared in Goku's chest. He rolled over, ignoring the screaming pain in his ribs, and crawled toward his rival. Vegeta! Don't tell me you. After all that. Vegeta's hand suddenly twitched. He slammed his fist weakly against the ground. Shut up, Kakarot. Vegeta mumbled into the dirt. I'm resting. Goku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, collapsing onto his back and staring up at the stars. A weak, delirious laugh bubbled up from his chest. We won. I think we actually won. Vegeta rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow. He looked at the sky. It felt open. The heavy pressure of the Grand Priest, the cold calculation of Zalama, it was all gone. The universe felt lighter. Dangerous, perhaps. Chaotic, but free. We didn't just win, Vegeta said, wiping blood from his lip. We broke the chain of command. There is no Grand Priest. There is no architect. The angels, the gods of destruction. The hierarchy is shattered. So, who's in charge now? Goku asked, blinking. Before Vegeta could answer, a small light appeared above them. It descended slowly, revolving with a childlike innocence. It was the Omni-King, Zeno. But he was not alone. The future Zeno was beside him. They floated down to the shattered arena, hovering just a few feet from the exhausted Saiyans. Their expressions were unreadable. Usually blank, usually cheerful now, they looked somber. They looked at the gold dust that filled the air. They looked at the empty spot where the Grand Priest used to stand. Then, they looked at Goku and Vegeta. Goku, the present, Zeno said quietly. You broke the toy, the future Zeno added. Goku sat up, wincing. He didn't know if he had the strength to fight the Omni-Kings. We had to, Zen-chan. He tried to erase us. He tried to erase everything. Zeno floated closer. He reached out a small hand and touched the drifting gold dust of Zalama. Zalama was the rules, Zeno said. He made the game work. Now the game has no rules, future Zeno said. The two small gods looked at each other. The tension was thick enough to choke on. If Zeno decided that a universe without rules was boring, he could erase it all with a wave of his hand. This was the true aftermath, the judgment of the child god. Zeno turned back to Goku. A slow smile spread across his face. That was, Zeno started. So cool, both Zenos shouted in unison, throwing their hands up. The shiny man! The big punch! Whoosh! Bam! Zeno spun around in the air. It was the best fight ever! Way better than the Tournament of Power. Vegeta's jaw dropped. You're not angry. Why? Future Zeno tilted his head. The rules were boring anyway. Now, anything can happen. Zeno floated down until he was eye level with Goku. His expression turned serious for just a moment, a flash of ancient wisdom peering through the childlike mask. But Goku, Zeno whispered, if there are no rules, and no architect, who was gonna fix the cracks? Goku looked at his hands. He felt the lingering memory of Gogeta's power, the upgrade. He looked at Vegeta, who was staring at his own fist, with a mix of fear and ambition. They had killed the system. They had liberated the multiverse. But in doing so, they had inherited the responsibility of keeping it from falling apart. They were no longer just warriors defending a planet. They were the pillars holding up the sky. We will, Goku said, his voice steady. He stood up, shaky but standing tall. He offered a hand to Vegeta. Vegeta looked at the hand. He scoffed, slapping it away, but used the momentum to stand up on his own. Speak for yourself, Kakarot. Vegeta smirked, crossing his arms. I'm just going to make sure you don't break it again. The journey back to Universe 7 was not instantaneous. Without the Grand Priest to manage the warp tunnels of the multiverse, the travel felt raw and manual. Whis, who had arrived silently in the cube during the aftermath, ferried the two Saiyans home. Inside the transparent cube, traveling through the kaleidoscope of hyperspace, no one spoke. Whis stood at the helm, his staff quiet. The orb at the top of his staff, usually glowing with constant updates from the angelic network, was dark. The server was down. For the first time in millions of years, the angel was not an attendant to a hierarchy. He was just a guide. It feels strange, Whis finally said, breaking the silence. He didn't turn around. The constant hum of the Grand Minister's will. It is gone. Silence is a very loud sound. Isn't it? Goku sat against the glass wall, watching the galaxies blur past. Are you okay with that? Whis tapped his staff against the floor. A faint, independent light flickered in the orb, his own energy. We angels were created to serve the system. But you two, he paused, a small smile gracing his lips. You have shown us that perhaps the system was merely a training wheel. I suppose I must now decide my own purpose. The cube slowed. The familiar purple nebula of Beerus' planet came into view. As they landed on the grass near the Oracle Fish's lake, Lord Beerus was waiting. The god of destruction looked different. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating. He was standing on the edge of the cliff, hands behind his back, staring up at the sky with a focus that was terrifyingly sharp. He turned as Goku and Vegeta stepped out, limping but upright. Beerus looked them up and down. He felt the residual heat coming off them, the echo of Gogeta's Omni-Breaker energy that still clung to their skin like the smell of ozone after a storm. "You did it," Beerus said. "It wasn't a question." "Yeah." Goku rubbed the back of his neck, wincing. "We did. You killed the architect," Beerus continued, his golden eyes narrowing. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The safety rails are gone. The limits on reality? Gone. If a universe breaks now, there is no backup file. There is no reset button." Vegeta stepped forward. He looked the god of destruction in the eye, not with the defiance of a subordinate, but with the level gaze of an equal. "Then we don't break it," Vegeta said, his voice rough. "We get stronger. Strong enough to hold it together ourselves." Beerus held the gaze for a long moment. Then, he huffed, a smirk twitching at his whiskers. "Arrogant mortals. You think you can replace the foundation of existence with just your muscles? Not just muscles." Goku grinned, clenching his fist. "Willpower. That's what Gogeta said, right? The system can't calculate will." Beerus turned back to the lake. "Go heal. Eat. Sleep. Because tomorrow, the training changes. You aren't training to beat a rival anymore. You are training to sustain the cosmos." That night, Goku and Vegeta sat on the highest peak of Beerus World. The food had been eaten, the wounds bandaged. The night sky of the Divine Realm was breathtaking, a tapestry of nebulae and star clusters that stretched into infinity. But it looked different now. The stars didn't seem fixed in a rigid grid. They seemed to drift, to pulse, to burn, with a wilder, more chaotic fire. "Kakarot," Vegeta said quietly, not looking at him. "Yeah, Vegeta. That form. When we were him. When we were Gogeta." Vegeta looked at his own hand. "I felt it. The absolute freedom. No limits. No ceiling. For a few minutes, we were the strongest thing that has ever existed. It was incredible," Goku admitted, leaning back on his hands. "But it was scary, too. Being that strong, it felt lonely." Vegeta nodded slowly. "That is why we diffused. A power that absolute cannot exist permanently. It would burn the world down just by being there." Vegeta stood up. He tightened his gloves. The wariness was gone from his eyes, replaced by the eternal, burning fire of the Saiyan Prince. "But now we know it's there," Vegeta said, turning to Goku. "We know the peak exists, and I will not stop until I can reach that height. On my own." Goku laughed, jumping to his feet. He cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing in the quiet night. "I was hoping you'd say that, Vegeta. I'm not gonna let you get there first." They stood facing each other, silhouetted against the wild, untamed starlight of the new era. The system was dead. The architect was gone. The path ahead was unwritten, dangerous, and completely free. They assumed their stances. "Ready?" Goku asked. "Always." Vegeta replied. They vanished. The shockwave of their clash rang out, not a sound of destruction, but a bell ringing in the dawn of a new age. The stars burned quietly, as if remembering their will.